Hi everyone. I wanted to give you a little bit of an insight, one into my story and how I got into PR, and then very much into some of the characteristics that I look for when employing graduates or employing anybody into a role in my agency. So in terms of my career, I did drama. I did drama at Goldsmiths College and I loved it. It was absolutely fantastic, but I absolutely hated being on stage in an acting situation. So instead I get to do this all of the time, but on stage and just talking about things. I then went into publishing from that, and I found out in publishing that there was this career of journalism. So went into trade journalism, and that was the aspect of journalism that I didn't know anything about at all. In fact, I started work on a magazine called Glass and Glazing Products. It was the 1990s, it was the rise of the PVC industry, and there was this publication that was going out to businesses who made double glazing windows. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating, but actually made really interesting because the guy who was my editor, we were the youngest editorial team in EMAP Business Communications, which then was one of the biggest publishers in the trade side of things, was a guy called Damon Beasley. And Damon Beasley has since gone on to write The In-Betweeners, and he's also gone on to write a BBC programme called White Gold, which was all about the double glazing industry in the 1990s. So there is comedy gold wherever you look. And also listening to Emma, Lindsay and Ed earlier, to be able to say there is interest in any aspect of products, manufacturing and services. You just have to dig a little bit deeper and get into the stories and the interesting aspects. I work in B2B, business to business. You can work in B2C, business to consumer. Those are two of the different aspects, and we've also spoken about in-house roles that you can go to. They all come from a very similar place, but they are working with different types of organisations and different types of brands. And one of the things that I learned as a journalist that I really, really wanted to get into was actually I wanted to find out how companies formed the messages that they were putting out. What were the key things that they were really interested in saying out to the market? I always felt, well, I love being a journalist, and it was a bit of a red carpet treatment, that there was a whole conversation that was going on that I wasn't a part of. And that understanding from the inside and getting to know how businesses run and how they work is utterly fascinating to me. Ed spoke about find your why. My why was intelligent conversation. That's what I love. I love working with people who are absolute experts in their market. So I set up Transform Communications about 6 years ago, after working for myself very much as a freelancer. We call ourselves an agency that makes you the go-to people in your market, because for us it's about building authority and credibility. And how do you get that authority and credibility? It's from a depth of knowledge and expertise. So we do a lot of thought leadership. We write a lot, sometimes up to 10, 12,000 words a week, in really pulling together in-depth studies and research that fuels a communication strategy, some of which can be used in PR, some of which can be used in social media, some of which can be used in digital marketing. But at the centre of it is a damn good communications plan and really in-depth knowledge and research in a particular area. So I said I was going to talk about some of the characteristics of what I believe makes a good PR person. What I want to see is an insatiable curiosity, absolute insatiable curiosity about the world in which you live, about the programmes that you watch, the books that you read. And I want to see an application of that. How have you collated information from lots of different areas and lots of different sources to come up with something new. I spoke about curiosity. It's one of the key words. I employed somebody purely on the basis of the fact that I said, how do you think people would describe you? And she said, I think people would tell you I'm curious. And I went, love it, that was it, at that point, because I knew that she had the rigorous intellect and insight that I was looking for. Flexibility, being able to change. Ed and I were having a conversation on the way over where we were talking about the requirement to make plans in PR. You put together a strategy, you put together a plan, it's all going fantastic, it's all mapped out, and then something happens and it gets thrown out of the window and you've got to stand up in a boardroom or call your client and come up with an alternative strategy on the spot. That flexibility, that being able to adapt to situations, not someone who puts their head in the hand and disappears, literally physically disappears down. So flexibility. Collation of information. You guys do this all the time. You're at university. You go into the library, you research, you pull different things together. You use that in your essay writing, you use that in your dissertations. That collation of information from different sources is fundamental. It all sounds grand, and I remember sitting there when I was first being trained, going, I don't know what strategy is. What is strategy? And not really being able to understand it. In my mind, strategy is actually just being able to see the big picture, seeing why you want to do something, what is the reason behind it, and how it aligns to the goals and objectives of that organisation that you're working for. Writing. I've mentioned 10,000 words a week. You come into the office, you sit down, you've got a press release, you've got a 2,000-word article to write. You have to get your head into the mind space of the client that you're writing for, and you've got to make it sound exactly like them. So an ability to flex style. Building relationships is absolutely essential. And through those relationships, you will need to be able to demonstrate credibility. Do you know the story that you are selling? Do you know the client's business? Have you got the backup information? Have you done your homework? We're all list makers, absolute list makers, organisational to-do lists, charts, all the rest of it, because organisation comes with that, with knowing what you need to know to be able to sell something in. With credibility comes gravitas, and that is, it was always a quality that I was told I never had when I was 22, standing up and having to pitch into people, and it's been something I've really worked on, how to have gravitas, and some of that does come obviously from authority and the credibility. PR is not always known for honesty. Spin has been a word that's been used about the PR profession a lot. It is something that journalists can doubt about you when you pick up the phone and you're talking to them. Are you just trying to sell me a line? So there needs to be a real belief, and that can mean having to have quite honest and uncomfortable conversations with your client where you go, you don't have the credibility to be able to make that statement. You can't go out and say you're a sustainable organisation unless you've got a depth of messaging, because actually it will be unpicked very, very quickly, especially in today with technology. So unless there's a really solid basis and you know what you're saying is true, I wouldn't personally ever recommend going there. Attention to detail, turning up on time, list making, plans. Clients don't forgive stupid mistakes. You are their voice out in the marketplace. You absolutely have to be rigorous in all of your checking and all of the attention to detail that goes out. Starting salary according to PRCA is £22,374 if you want to be precise. But about 22,000 will a graduate as an account executive would be able to have. There are other avenues there are internships. Account managers, 10 grand on top, about 32,000. And then you get to account directors, where you can earn about 45, 46,000. It can go up to about 74 board directors side of things, For in-house PR roles, there's an average of about 43,000, but they tend to be more at the communications manager level rather than at starting level. I think PR is an absolutely amazing industry. I don't think there's many consultancy professions that you can get into, and in a starting position, you can be in a boardroom helping define how that organisation communicates itself out into the market. It's really a fantastic way to understand business, to understand marketing, and to really just be able to communicate. Thank you. Hope that's given you some good ideas.